Stoner is. Okay, we're gonna go to the face.
Thank you, Mr.
Fully under the bus.
Did it to himself. Okay. All right.
If a grain of salt is enough, then a macadamia nut size ought to be perfect.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the V.A.C. Roundtable number 26. We have a special guest with us tonight. It is Marcus Bubbleman Richardson, and Ricardo Pieta will be playing Marcus Richardson tonight because Bubbleman apparently did not show up on time. So if he does show up, we'll go into these questions a little more in depth, but I would like to welcome Marcus. Hi, Marcus. Welcome. Marcus was fortunate. We said questions that I provided him beforehand, and the wonderful Stoner answered them. So Rico is going to do his best Bubbleman impression, and I'm going to start off with the first question, and then we'll go to Michael for the second question, and we'll go for Brian for the third question. And Rico, if you would like to ask yourself the fourth question, you're more than welcome to. But we're just having a little bit of fun until hopefully Marcus does show up. But here we go. V.A.C. Roundtable number 26. So how'd you come up in the cannabis field?
Oh, well, thank you, ATN. It's great to be here at the roundtable for V.A.C. Normally get to join you at Hash Church, and it's fun to flip the script. You know, I'm really happy to do this. I was excited when you invited me on, so I went ahead and prepared some questions that I'm going to read off now. You know, it's hard to say how I came up in the cannabis field, but I guess my passion drove me towards it. My first passion of smoking it, really like to smoke it, and it just grew and grew and grew. You know, I was taking it much further than any of my close friends were, and I got it to the point where smoking and hanging with friends took over my life. Eventually, my friends and I realized we should become, you know, artisans or something like that, because we weren't allowed to have it. You know, had to go out and advocate for our rights. We weren't allowed to smoke it, weren't allowed to grow it. And so we just got together and we started as hemp activists. We were located in Manitoba, where hemp could and would grow extremely well, right? My partners all approached our Minister of Health and Agriculture and asked what was keeping us from growing it. Eventually, after our first year, we got a license to grow an experimental 5-acre crop. First one in over 73 years in our province, ATN. It's really a big deal.
Thank you, Marcus. That's great to hear. Michael, do you have a question for Marcus at this time?
Yes, indeed. So what drew you into the hash world there, Marcus?
Oh, well, you know, the ceiling cannabis was given me, right? Like I mentioned above, I was smoking a lot of it, smoking an enormous amount. Now it's plus a day, easy. Once I got to British Columbia and started selling large amounts of cannabis, hundreds of pounds per week, the free cannabis was flowing so fast that I could barely get high off it anymore. I had played a little bit with sifting in Manitoba pre-95, but by 96 in BC, I was really starting to look at it. I would see hash from Lebanon and Afghanistan roll through Vancouver, and that piqued my interest. But some of it was no stronger than the flower I had. So eventually, I got into dry sifting fairly deep. I had met Rob Clark in 95, thanks to a good friend, Hillary Black. I first met him at my house, and then eventually in Amsterdam. The sift he was smoking would melt into a liquid, and he would say, if it didn't bubble, or if it don't bubble, it ain't worth the trouble. I'm sorry, I'm a little high. This would later become my company's slogan. And I would find out it was actually Skunk Man who coined the term. Another shout out to Hash Church.
Yes, I loved Hash Church, and thank you for having me on, as well as allowing me to be on so many episodes over the years. It's been an honor to learn and as well as to educate. Councilmember Buckley, do you have a question for a Bubbleman?
Yes. Mr. Richardson, I'm on to you. I know in reality, your name is Rico and you're an American. So being an American, can you give us some insight into the cannabis realm from your point of view in Canada? The floor is yours.
Yeah, well, where in the world is Rico Richardson? I can't tell you. But the cannabis realm in Canada is a big, complex thing, right? First, it's comprised of two parts, medical and recreational, don't you know? Medical is, of course, how it got through the door. We've had medical cannabis in Canada since early 2000, don't you know? You could get a license to grow it yourself for a solid decade and a half before companies got involved producing cannabis for medical purposes. A lot of companies focused attention on it, and for a while it got better. However, when recreational showed up in 2017, everything changed, and companies that were growing for medical started growing for recreational. Patients started getting left out. One example, if you wanted to sell it to a province, you had to get enough to make sure the province could buy it and you could even restock it. That was recreational. For medical, they had no such rule. You could sell smaller lots without having any left to refill. This left patients out in the rain. As if you found a cultivar that worked, it could be a very small batch that didn't show up for months and months again, or ever. So that's the view. Little snippet.
That's very excellent. I was wondering, Rico, would you like to ask Marcus a question?
Well, Marcus, I'd like to know what it's like using your system legally, your mail system, that is. Right? Like that's some straight up Mr. Rogers neighborhood shit, Canada. All right, you are, Rico. It's pretty cool to have cannabis show up in the mail, eh? It also created a space where I could gift cannabis to friends and send it in the mail legally. You get used to it pretty fast, though, and the novelty wears off soon. Gee, thanks, Marcus, man. That's really insightful. I appreciate your time. No problem, Rico. No problem.
Thank you, Council Member. So, from your perspective, what are some of the pros and cons of a legal market?
Well, the pros certainly are no guns in our faces, no cops arresting us, no family services taking our children, etc. This is huge. I cannot say this loud enough. This is huge. That being said, of course, the regulations are intense, and the amount of people who came to cannabis just for a job that really have zero interest in cannabis and certainly are not fighting for cannabis, these people slow things down a great deal. They are the ones who are drinking a whiskey at the end of the night, not smoking a joint. They still have preconceived notions steeped in prohibition propaganda about cannabis and its users. So we still have a little fight on our hands, eh?
No doubt about it. Michael, do you have a question for Marcus?
Yes, absolutely. Keeping quality in the game. What are some of the products that excite you out there? And maybe even more importantly, what are some that you think we should be wary of?
Oh, well, being Canadian, I think I'll keep it positive, don't you know? I love the idea of creating an unadulterated cannabinoid high for folks that is pure full melt bubble hash, dry sift, and or rosin from flower sift or bubble. That being said, we have a hazel hash joint we sell at Embark that is pure hash, no paper, no glue. Although the hash is medium grade, the novelty of the product is awesome. And pulling folks away from the pre-rolled joint market into a pure hash joint is also unique. No rig, no papers, no carb cap and banger, no blowtorch, no anything needed other than a lighter and you're smoking hash.
Right on. Councilmember Buckley, do you have another question for Marcus?
Yes, and it's a provocative one. What is the ceiling of the most expensive joint, if there is one?
Oh, joints are the most popular product in Canada, but we just made it legal to mix categories. What I mean by that is that cannabis is a category 1 product, and hash and concentrate oils, etc., are category 2 products. Up until very, very recently in Canada, you were not allowed to mix these 2 products together. Now that we can, I am sure we will see some sipped and bubble joints, etc., but I am not sure how far we will go. Rules in Canada for extracts is it cannot go over 1,000 milligrams of THCA. So that doesn't answer your question at all. The question's really out there for anybody. What is the most expensive joint or hash out there?
Well, what would it entail, what the size it would be? I mean, we have a little bit of time. Let's devolve on this subject for a second. You know, I've seen artistic joints. I've seen joints that are made to look like real objects until you actually light them. At the same time, I've seen 24 karat rolling papers. Okay. So, you know, is it something that is, you know, buying the most expensive joint, rolling it in the gold papers, and then it show up on the most expensivest or something like that? I don't know. I mean, it seems it's kind of antithetical to cannabis and the ideals of cannabis to have the most expensive joint out there. However, there is, you know, Dom Perignon, which is one of the finer champagnes, you know, are stocked even at small places all around the globe. So, I mean, the highest quality is available, just not in the quantities necessarily that, you know, are expected. But I mean, I've seen retail joints as high as $70 to $100. And I think that's just outrageous for, you know, the cannabis that's inside it. And if it's a pre-roll, you know, that's a different thing than if it's a actually fresh cut up used joint. Am I incorrect? I mean, I would prefer a freshly rolled flower as opposed to a processed flower that's been left in a tube with oxygen, with paper and everything, soaking up all the terpenes and sesquiterpenes, etc. You know what I'm saying? So, you know, maybe in the future, it's like when I go to New Orleans, they actually prepare in front of you bananas Foster, such as they bring out the bananas fresh, they bring out the, you know, the caramel and the, you know, all the things that they're going to make, and they throw the bourbon on, light it right in front of you, and so, you know, is that the future, you know, the experience is going somewhere and picking out your most, you know, the most expensive thing there, and then having them roll that joint specifically for you right at that moment for you to enjoy, you know? I don't know. It sounds kind of weird. Thoughts?
Yeah, I have you know, when I'm thinking about joints, 2 joints in the past jumped to mind. One expensive and one not so expensive, but just fun. A buddy of mine back in college, he had seen some picture in High Times or something where somebody had made a joint that looked like a rocket. So it had the boosters on the bottom, and it was one big joint. It was like 8 inches tall, but it had basically 4 joints, 3 on the bottom that hold it up as a tripod, and then the joint. And it, if you did it right, it would actually smoke. You could light all 3 of those joints and smoke them at once. And we had played with it. We had to tinker with it for quite a while, but we actually got the bloody thing to work. That was a lot of fun. But I remember at one of these conferences that we were out there in California, and somebody pulled a joint out of a bag, and I can't remember how much he said it cost, but it wasn't like an expensive avant-garde joint. It was just, that was how much he put into it. And it was like, you know, X amount of keef and X amount of bud, and you know, there was X amount of everything. It was a pretty big joint. It went around a party of, I don't know, 50 people, maybe 50 times. So just the sheer amount that you could put in a massive paper, I can imagine being expensive. But I think that the really top end joints that that come to mind, I've never seen one, but I've heard about them and seen them, you know, on the web, are just, you know, sort of artistic expressions, you might say, and about the size of a cigar, but you know, made in a way that you just have to have one. You know, it's kind of like, you know, have to have the finest champagne or something like that. If there's a certain taste or a certain level of luxury to it, then I think people will buy it, even if it's $500 or $1,000 or $2,000 for a joint.
Well, Marcus, just the other day we were talking about champagne, the genetics. So having champagne in a joint, you know, hey, around there. But Councilmember Buckley, you actually produce joints legally. So, I mean, what would, in your opinion, be something of the most expensivest?
You know, like maybe just speaking from like a retail point of view, and not really like on the craft side. You know, I'm not gonna call it any brand specifically, but when, you know, it's some have very exotic casing, you know, and you see the price for like a pre-roll and the casing's like the size of the baseball or like even bigger. And I look at them and I'm like, that's a lot of money for a pre-roll that's 27% THC, which I could go find one for $7, I'm sure. And then like, you're like, okay, like I just try to vision like maybe I would buy one for, or maybe I'll buy three for you three for your birthday or something, just as like a gimmicky kind of deal. But like, would you like leave work and be like, man, you know what, I need a pre-roll and I'm going to grab one of these $100 joints? You know, it's just like, I don't even know how that works out, but I don't know. I mean, I guess there's a market for it. I guess some people dig it. I don't, you know, brands are brands, but those are things that make me question some pre-rolls and stuff like that, where you kind of look like, you know, it's not always, it's like my father-in-law tells me, he's like, it's not always like the most expensive bottle of wine. You just got to know the good quality ones and you can find really good, inexpensive wine. So that's just kind of things I see.
Councilmember Ricardo.
Oh, hey guys, glad to be back. Wow, that was weird. I don't know, it disappeared for a second. Shit. Now, I think we're talking about some kind of craft again, farm or cultivar that is select. You know, it only comes around every now and then. You know, the grower, you know, the lineage, you know, the history. It's like having a really nice reserve on hand of some like just quality drink or something where it's like special occasion, I'm gonna pop this out, or whatever. But for a joint, I could see kind of going upwards of maybe like $60, maybe 100, depending on what it is. There's these things called snow cones where they roll them in like top shelf flour with wax strip or whatever, and then kind of sticky on the outside with keef in it. So for like a party or some special get together, I could see that, you know, sharing it, like Mike was saying. If you're getting a whole party blitzed, that's a good investment for $100 just to show up and say, hey guys, check this out. But like Brian was saying, for just everyday use, something that's reasonable, look, I'm not. It takes a lot for me to look at the prices now where it's like $10, $15, $20, $25. I'm like, fuck, man, that's what I was paying for a sack back in the day. Oh, I got to pay that for a joint now. Like, and if it's old or if it doesn't hit like it should, it's frustrating. Like I just burned down this entire doobie and I don't feel shit. That I feel like I got took. I feel had. I don't like it. But yeah, stick with what works, man. The gimmicks and shit that's just what they are, gimmicks. I guess there's a market for it.
Yeah, we would call that pretendica. Nothing worse than getting a fresh hit when you're all excited and buying back when you only had one choice from your dealer, and you get all excited and you smell it, you get home and you smoke it, and you're like, okay, that high is coming. I know it's coming. Is it gonna arrive tomorrow? It's rather late. What the hell's going on here? Yeah, that's the worst. Councilmember Crouch, you had another thought?
Yeah, well, first, in response to that, we came up with a general rule. If you had to ask yourself or ask anyone else if you felt that, then that was enough to say that it wasn't good. Just that alone, you know? So, yeah, don't even, you know, tax your mind trying to figure it out if you're even thinking about that. But yeah, the the kids today. No, but seriously, as kind of the old fogey, I came up in the 70s around New York City and was in a position to see, witness really cannabis that was most people just a touchstone of the countercultures, music or something like that, Panama Red by the New Riders of Purple Sage. But no, there was actually plant material that was very, very consistently red colored and incredibly beautiful, incredibly, the smell and the taste, like it wasn't didn't get as high as Hawaiian, but it had a taste that was better than anything else on this planet. I swear to you, there was nothing that tasted better than Panama Red. And it was strikingly beautiful. And the thing is that back in that day, back in, 71, 68, 78, anywhere in that time period, you had a very big range of cannabis available to you. You could get diesel weed, we called it. That was cannabis that was hauled over in a diesel hold of a ship and smelled it. Even worse than that, there was salt water. What is it? The the salt weed, I forget, the ocean weed, I forget what they called it. Seaweed. Yeah, of course, I forgot. Seaweed. And the seaweed was terrible. That was $15 a pound. That was the cheapest, worst weed you get, was seaweed. And seaweed was bales that were thrown over and that got a little waterlogged and became really nasty, unsmokable. Worse than diesel weed, if you can imagine it. But we had cannabis that was smuggled in chocolate. That actually tasted like chocolate. That was not bad, really. But I diverged. So the thing is that you could have really, really, really bad weed, and you could have really, really fantastic weed. On one end was diesel weed, and on the other end was, Acapulco Gold and Panama Red. The stuff from Hawaii Rainbow, Maui Wowie, and the stuff from over there in Asia. You get the Thai stick and the stuff coming out of what was it, the red, Cambodian red, I think it was called. And that, I believe, is what was carried over by like the military guys growing up in Alaska, and what we now know as Alaskan thunderfuck. These things are real and fantastic. And what happened was the average cannabis, from growing cannabis indoors under lights and really refined, and getting everybody basically on board with Sensimilia and everything, we've really raised the average stoner up to a quality of weed that was unimaginable to the average stoner back in the 60s, maybe, or the 70s, who was smoking that, somewhere closer to diesel weed. But the thing is, we also lost the fantastic top end stuff. And you have to realize that, we've brought up the average to this really fantastic weed, but we've lost the really top end. And I think that that's the experience that we need to get back to somehow, get past the drug war and start getting to where we can actually, really have an honest comparison and a contest. Wouldn't that be a great Cannabis Cup, where every country has a couple of different entries, and you put Hawaiian next to Cambodian and see what comes out on top? Because I think it's going to be a whole lot of fun. But we have to get back to that. I mean, right now they're still growing indoors under lights in Hawaii. Not a good scene. So, I think people need to understand that we did come a real long ways. The average pot smoker certainly is much better off than they were in the 70s. But the super hardworking connoisseur that busted ass to get the best bud actually is having more trouble today than they did back then. So it's you win some, you lose some. But I just want to make sure people understand that, really understand, because the buying into that weed is better today is basically buying into the DEA's bullshit, buying into the government's line. And they'd like you to think that's true. But and finally, the DEA tested a bunch of different cannabis back then, and they said that the cannabis that we were getting out of Hawaii at that time was only like 15% THC, something like that. But that actually makes sense. Perceptively, the strongest weed that we were smoking was likely due to the terpene and cannabinoid composition in total, right? The what did you call it? Not the entourage effect, but the
Ensemble effect.
The ensemble effect, indeed, the ensemble effect. But that's the thing. You can have a very, very, very perceptively strong cannabis and have it not be the THC necessarily be the causal factor, and that explains why Marinol, which is 100% THC and illegal in the pharmacy, is of no real appeal to the cannabis consumer out there, and that's 100% THC. So THC is not the answer. It's definitely an indicator, but it's not the answer. That mix, that complex mix of all these elements is what we want, and it's a beautiful experience. I'll leave you with one last thought. Remember, anybody that's been to Amsterdam, back in the day, they had some fantastic Turkish hash, Afghan hash. About 3 o'clock in the morning, you go to the bathroom or go out and do something, there'd be at least somebody out there near the front of the bed and breakfast, the youth hostels and stuff. There'd be always somebody near the front just smoking a bowl hash because it tasted so good. And they only had a couple of days, and they basically spent like all night smoking hash after everybody else in their party went to bed because it just tasted so good. And if you've never smoked Afghan hash, Afghanistan's best quality hand pressed hash, a beautiful golden brown hash, then you really you've got something to live for, look forward to.
Well, Amsterdam is the place to go for hash, that is for sure. Speaking of diesel weed, it still didn't go away. We had diesel weed actually in the 90s in West Virginia. So much so in Morgantown, it's a large music community. One of the bands called themselves Diesel Weed because there was a large diesel weed that came through and it leaked into the weed, and everybody else had the same fucking weed because we were all the same dealers. I was one of them. And so, yes, to corroborate some of what Michael is saying, but also to say, yes, the quality was better depending on your access and source. A lot of us still in the 80s and 90s only had access to very crappy South border grown Coca-Cola, repacked, rehydrated black seeds, peeling apart, and there's mold and all kinds of white stuff. I mean, some people even still get that to this day, unfortunately, depending on where you are in the country. So I didn't even know. I saw so much bad quality weed. It took a solid year or so before I finally saw and was around really green, fresh weed. And then I realized what it was about. So yes, there is a quality out there if you have access and source. The problem, of course, was access and source, which is why, a lot of people, and depending on where you grew up in the country, are a little more educated about cannabis, such as if you tend to be out here on the West Coast, you tend to grow up a little more educated about cannabis than you are where I grew up in the South. It was still there, it was accessible, but the educated consumer for cannabis has been around quite significantly in the West Coast and Southwest states that I have found through my travels across the United States. So they look for and demand a higher quality because they know what to look for. Whereas there's still those that are just finding all about cannabis today, and it's through that crappy south of the border cannabis that doesn't necessarily meet the standards, but there's enough there that it gives them that understanding. And then when they hopefully get access to real quality cannabis, which is still a problem all throughout all the states, even those in the traditional market, quality is still an issue and is always the challenge. So yes, I do believe there was quality back then, but I think there was probably more bad quality than there was solid quality, depending on how it was packaged and shipped, etc. Even from your time, you were stating diesel as well as salt laden from sea travel. So there's that. Councilmember Prieta.
When you were talking about all that nostalgia weed, Panama Red and Thai Stick and all that, I was going to all the different terpenes, like we eventually got to in my head, like, man, what kind of hash that must have made, the taste, like, because that's where the real stuff is. But I can't wait, man, the international stuff, like you talk about, the international cups, the access to the different stuff where the farmers over there don't have to worry about prohibition. They could stop fucking around and like actually grow their plant to the best of their ability and put out some amazing cultivars. I'm looking forward to those days, man. Like we haven't. You're a cannabis snob, ATN, and I know why, but you are, and you have to call it out. George, you are too. Mike, you too. Brian, I think you're getting there. I'm still stuck in that. Give me it. I'll smoke it. I'll use it. Just, I don't. I may provide commentary afterwards, but I'll use it. So the diesel weed, all that stuff, it's like, does that cook down?
No, well, it always depends. But yeah, I am definitely a snob, but I've also afforded myself that luxury, as well as I'm around it all the time, being in a dispensary. So, but I also buy it all and try it all myself because I want to know the quality is there. I want to know that I am actually getting an eighth, especially post 64. I want to make sure that I am actually getting what my money is worth, because back in the day before 64, people would come back and say, hey, this bag's light, because everybody weighs their weight. And we're like, okay, let's see this. So it's all dependent. It's interesting. It's always been fascinating, but nor here nor there. Okay, well, we only had one question left, and Councilmember Armstrong came. So Councilmember, I'm going to put that in there for you. So Rico is Bubbleman and is playing Bubbleman today, since Bubbleman was happy enough to provide us with actual answers for the first time ever to questions. So, Councilmember Armstrong, would you like to ask Bubbleman a question?
I don't have the question. So.
It's in chat.
Where it must have been in there before I came in, because. Okay, gotcha. Hey, Bubbleman, could you lift the veil a little bit to all the inside stuff for the council on what you see behind the scenes in the industry?
No. So we were getting to this Legends dinner that Bubbleman has going on, which is pretty awesome, and I'm sure he'll invite us on to Hash Church to talk about it at some other point in time, since he wasn't able to show up here. But the stoner did provide answers, and I think maybe he may have misinterpreted that we wanted him here to actually talk about it. And he was like, "Oh, hey, this is the easiest interview I've ever done. Here's your questions, here's your answers. Thank you. Have a good day. I want to go smoke hash." But anyway, so this is what he provided about Legends. The question was, Legends, can you lift the veil for us a bit? Right? And he says, Legends of Hash is a dinner I started almost 20 years ago in Amsterdam with my good friends, Skunkman Sam and Michael Rich. Rest in peace, Michael. It was always a special evening that was about smoking and enjoying hash with hashish aficionados. No cameras were allowed, no filming, no promoting through social media. It was just about getting together with an amazing group of friends and smoking. It eventually turned into a small competition to see who had the best hash of the evening. This really attracted people because they love to compete and win. Fast forward to a few months ago, Addison Demora from Steep Hill, formerly and currently with 800 Pound Mantra, is putting on Legends with my support in Los Angeles on October 24th. So heads up, this month coming through in LA. Still private and invite only, so it doesn't matter. Heads up, pay attention. I guess maybe they'll put out some stuff after the party. We are hoping to grow the event in California so more people can get to experience it without affecting the integrity of the original event. Heads up, It's going to be a challenge, though, he says. But I look forward. This is Rico. This isn't Marcus now. I look forward to veterans having their own cups and getting together with veterans across the country. Ideally, the VFW posts, the American Legion posts, the DAV posts will all have a gardeners club, right? Ideally, they'll all turn away from being bars and serving booze to being dispensaries and slinging weed, what we really want, right? And we can go there and congregate like we want to, but this will be another way to have these co-ops, if you will, farmers markets type deals, also member benefits through the American Legion and VFW posts. But he's right. Who doesn't love competition? Vets love competition. So, throw in a chili cook-off, like, or some kind of other barbecue for the pot thing. I think that'll be pretty popular in cities across the country for vets.
I think, well, as the now ambassador to the California State Fair for the first ever cannabis competition, I hope it will inspire others, and you will see local competitions in your state where it's legal or tolerated. And since here in California, it's opened up initially strictly to licensed growers. However, in the future, it's going to be open up to backyard growers. So any person who over the age of 18, pardon me, the age of 21, who can grow their 6 plants can potentially, compete. So, I look forward to a day when there's a VFW or an American Legion, local, regional, or state cup, so that we could get together and actually compare our harvests and actually see how they're done, and see what they test out to be, and learn from each other. That's also the great thing, is every gardener that I know has a different way to grow. So but at the same time, I want to smoke Rico's weed, I want to smoke Brian's weed, I want to smoke George's weed, I want to smoke Michael's weed, and I maybe want to smoke mine too. So it's also about the communal and sharing. So any other thoughts on this issue? Well, that makes for yes, George, go ahead.
Well, I just think I'll just touch on what I was doing this past weekend. So that was a cannabis cup that's in its 24th year. And just to tell everybody a story, that's like a grassroots cup. And I'll explain how it's done in the end, because it's kind of the end of this story. 24 years ago, they were having their first hemp and harvest fest in New York State. And they got Peter Jennings from ABC News to come up and do a story on it. So he gets up to the festival and he wants to talk to all these growers. And this is, of course, deep into prohibition. And all the growers are like, yeah, I'm not going on ABC News, to tell everybody that I grow weed in New York State. So what they decided to do instead was have the growers anonymously put an ounce of weed into a competition under the name of the weed, and then have that throw the joints out to the people at the festival, and then have them judge it by applause. That became the New York State Harvest Cup, the cup, and they started having it every year. And they've stuck with it at kind of that grassroots level. You never know how many entries you're going to get. The only thing is they have to 1 to 2 ounces of weed, and then the rollers roll it up, and then they throw it out to the crowd, and then you pass it and tell them what you're passing. So very grassroots type of thing, and I would love to see. Obviously, just like everybody was saying, these type of competition really brings the community together. Just the cannabis community, and especially the growing community, and allows like patients like me, like getting hooked up with a grower that can grow quality medicine at a decent price. That's the future for me, right? It's not the medical program that I'm spending ungodly amounts of money on in Pennsylvania, or that I would be in any other state. It's finding somebody or being able to grow myself quality medicine for, at least 80% of that cost. So, and I think that's the real value of these competitions, is the community, how it grows us as a community, and honestly, how it connects patients to growers. So just wanted to add that. Oh, and Jerry Berry won the Harvest Cup. It was excellent.
Nice. Councilmember Prieta.
Well, since I don't want to have this be like our shortest roundtable on record, so I want to extend it out a bit. And since we're on the topic of cups and whatnot, competitions, I'd like to know and pass this question around to the council members. What was your first cup experience? And also, have you ever been a judge for the cup?
Happy to go first.
Yeah, whoever, just pass it around.
Yeah.
So I guess, have you been to a cup? What was your first cup experience like? And have you been a judge?
First experience was the High Times Cannabis Cup 1995 in Amsterdam, and I was a judge. And I also got married. Oh God. Yeah. So it's kind of a lot there, you know what I'm saying? Dealing with getting married was its own set of shenanigans, and then being at the High Times Cannabis Cup, its own other set of shenanigans. But at the same time, it was a Cannabis Cup, so it's done during Thanksgiving.
If I may,
yes.
is this the famous cake experience?
Oh, I mean, the cake experience was on this trip. Yes.
Okay. All right. Wow. Yeah. That is a lot.
Yeah. So, yeah, it was actually, because my wedding cake had 1.5 pounds of trichomes in it. And it was devastating. To Jack Herrera, everybody, Todd, everybody who was there. You had some Monica, all that. Yeah, it was an OG wedding in Amsterdam, and it was crazy. It was on the stage at the Milkveg. But even before all that, just the competition itself, it was my first time to Amsterdam, so that was already disorienting enough. And then getting a place and then trying to figure out where to go was its own set of challenges, because I don't know Dutch. Fortunately, they all know English, so I was able to learn, pardon me, my Dutch sucks, can we speak in English? And then they're like, sure. Okay. And so then it was you had 1,500 Americans that basically go over to Amsterdam during Thanksgiving. And the problem is, it's one of the vacation months of the Netherlands. So half of everything is closed. 2, it's fucking winter right off the fucking North Sea. The wind and the rain and all that is just bad. Just yeah. So between it being very cold, then coffee shops were very small. You had to physically go to coffee shops to get and try the things. Some gave it to you, others you had to buy, others they gave you a discount on, others they had certain things. And I went to certain coffee shops, and they would show me the sample, and I would whip out an actual microscope that I would carry with me a little 30 times, and they would freak out and be like, oh, and hold on. And then all of a sudden a different sample would appear. You know what I'm saying? So I was kind of like, well, that's kind of fucking sketch. And then the first meeting where all the judges come together, which was at the Milkveg, I think it was. Yeah. And just the kind of the outside area, not where the stage area was, and just so many booths. And there was a building next door with all the different booths. Jack was signing books. Bubbleman actually had a booth there where he was actually doing his Bubbleman bags, I think, for the first time there. So I mean, it was really it was again 1,500 of us, but the movement was very small, so all those that set up kind of all knew each other. And I was working for Ecolution Hemp Company, so we were also setting up a booth there. So we were also retailing out of the store, but we're also writing wholesale paper to people in Europe if they wanted to buy our hemp. So a lot happened necessarily in that situation. But the cup was when we would gather in places. Some of the major companies like Greenhouse or Sensi Seed would literally have like topless women show up and pass out just these huge containers full of joints. They would meet people at the airport. Unfortunately, then they had to stop that because then they passed out joints and people started lighting up in Schiphol, and the airport's like, no, no, you don't. So it was just kind of a little bit of chaos because a lot of Americans didn't understand the European culture, and it's fine to go and smoke in a coffee shop. You can't just go by and then just go out on the street and puff. One, it was usually 20 degrees and cold as hell, but at the same time, it was, I remember being so surreal sitting in a coffee shop, and on the other side of the glass was a Dutch police officer. Wasn't batting an eye, didn't have that. He was dealing with something else altogether. But it was that first time I remember my ex-wife and I, we looked at each other and we're just kind of like, wow, we would not have this feeling in the United States. We would be absolutely paranoid as shit that cop was getting ready to come inside. So it was a abundance of appreciation for freedom, but it also showed me how repressed we were in the United States in that moment, just having that feeling of that fear. Whereas, we realized, wow, we were in a country where it was legal, and then that was an amazing feeling and sensation. But to add on to that was going into these coffee shops and then seeing all these qualities of hash. You could get a true Nepalese temple ball. You could get real Afghani hash. You could get, a true Moroccan 00. All these hashes that I had read about, you could try them. And not only that, different depending on which shop, they had all different types of the same kinds of stuff, in the sense they had a Nepalese temple ball, but it was different than the temple ball that you got at the other spots. So it was fun then what you wanted to go around and try all these, because as Michael stated earlier, the flavors of these hashes were unlike any of the flowers that I had smoked. And to have that plethora of choice, it was, I think the first thing I bought with this was a traditional Moroccan sebsi, which is a two-piece wooden pipe with a stone pipe that goes on the end, and it's perfect for smoking hash and for keef. It's long, so it can, it cools the smoke, etc. But the problem is that those headpieces are soapstone. If it fell off, it shattered. So it was added to the frustration of finding the hashish, but then trying to find the proper vessel to utilize, because you're only there for a week to 10 days. So it was a balance between usage and access, which opened up all kinds of different understandings in just that 1 week alone. So I know that's long-winded, but it was an amazing experience, and I was able to vote, and I came away feeling that it was not a good competition in how it was done. The competitions could be done better. And I would end up doing so here domestically over in time. I think, Michael, you were Councilmember Krawitz.
Yeah, man. Oh man, your story is so intriguing, because we crossed over, like we had, I don't know when we met, but it wasn't then. We didn't meet then. We met pretty long after that, I imagine. 95, maybe 99 or something like that. Maybe, I
Right.
don't know. But I was in college here in Virginia, and a friend of mine and I, we were going to go to Florida on spring break. And it actually just, I don't know, some kind of lark idea. I just did a comparison and looked at the price to fly to Amsterdam, just fully expecting it to be like 10 times the price to fly to Florida. And that would be the end of that thought. No, it was actually cheaper at that moment in time. And I think it was 1991. And it was really wild because we were flying on like British Airways, and the lady next to me on the flight over on my very first flight, she had this thick British accent and filled up her entire tray with little bottles of liquor while the guy was there with the cart, all free. And I think, after that inspiration, I didn't do the same thing, but I definitely, got a lot more than I probably would have if I hadn't been sitting next to that lady. But I reckon that between that lady and I, we got more in drinks and food than we paid in our tickets to fly over to Amsterdam and back. But anyway, my buddy and I went over to Amsterdam on our very first trip. And it would be years after that before I went to the first Cannabis Cup, but that was our first trip to Amsterdam. I think it was in like 91. And we were over there for a very short period of time. And I'd seen out of the like corner of my eye, this museum, this cannabis, marijuana, I guess it's the hashish and hemp museum. Is that what Ben calls it? The hashish and hemp museum, I think, in Amsterdam. And Ben Dronkers, NCC's, wonderful person, wonderful family, wonderful place. A different facet of what ATM was talking about later years. Yeah, I came back, I guess it was 93, with the intention of going to these places and checking out and exploring all this cannabis stuff, giving myself more time. And I walk in the front door of this hashish and hemp museum, and who's there behind the counter but Chris Conrad. And it was just, I guess, a fluky thing. He just happened to be there for not that long, but he had helped set up the place. He was one of the curators of the museum. And he gave me, I said, Chris, I'd never met him, that's when I met him. And I asked him, hey, can I get like a book or something like that for some information? There's more information I can take home with me. And he puts a stack of books in front of me, like 8 inches tall. Jack Harris' book, The Hemper, and Emperor Wears No Clothes, and his book, Hemp Lifeline of the Future, and Robert Clark's book, Cannabis Botany. I mean, it's this whole big stack of books. That was my first introduction, thrown into the deep end of cannabis stuff. So I came back, I guess it was 96. So it must have been the year after you. And I had already met Chris. I knew him, I was coming back to Amsterdam at this point. And I got connected right up with the two things, the Green Prisoners Amsterdam, which was an activist organization right there in Amsterdam, but it was mostly dedicated to helping expats fight extradition. And there was this one couple that were from Missouri, I think it was, Les and Cheryl Mooring. They were facing like 100 years back in Missouri for just a handful of marijuana plants. And we were working with the Dutch government to try to get them to, not be, to the Dutch government to work to try to prevent extradition so they wouldn't be sent back to the United States for this draconian sentence. And that experience was incredible, but they had a big relationship with the Cannabis Cup. So that's what pulled me into the Cannabis Cup for the very first time. When I went to the Cannabis Cup over there in Amsterdam, I was actually an activist coming in, working as an activist. And it was strange. It was a little surreal even to say that there was no activism really in the Cannabis Cup. I mean, there was like a table right near the front door when you checked in with some flyers and stuff. And of course, lots of people there were activists, and so, but there was no like activist presence there, really wasn't. And I asked
Jack was there, but not in a presence.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I asked Steve Hager if I could set up a table, and he said, well, I can give you a discount on a table in the hemp hall. So I actually, the very first year I was there, I actually paid half of a table, and the other half of the table I shared it with Yaya. And Yaya was in Breda, Netherlands, a cannabis head shop. wonderful head shop. Yaya was one of the first places on the net that I had a blog. Wasn't even called a blog yet. I wrote a webzine. So if you go digging around in the cannabis archives, you'll find a webzine written in the 90s and published on Yaya Net by Michael Krause. So, but anyway, I asked, I had this table set up, and the second year I did this table, I did this for many years in a row. And the second year I did the table, I went back to Steve Hager and I was like, come on, man, I'm an activist. I'm working as a volunteer. I don't have to pay for a table. Come on, help me out. So he's like, oh, be creative, figure something out. So I was all right. I set up a table in the hallway in the, what was that place? The PAX Party House.
PAX Party House.
Party House. Yeah, that's where they had all their table expositions and stuff like that. And then that Milky Way, the Milk Bag, was where they had the concerts and stuff later in the evening. And the PAX Party House was really neat because it was shared, the structure, overall structure shared with the police. They were literally in the same big building, like next door, and the police didn't care. I asked one time across the street at the gas station where the Cannabis Cup was, because that was my very first year. I was trying to find it. And I was literally, a few hundred yards away. And the guy was like, Cannabis Cup. And he pointed me to a coffee shop. This is Cannabis Cup every day. He said he had no idea what the hell I was talking about. I love it. So, but anyway, yeah, the second year I used the hallway upstairs. The third year, the restaurant within the building, the people that actually own the building caught on to that, how cool it was to use that hallway. And I had already set up, and Steve Hager said, this is going to be a huge, diplomatic incident here if you can't get out of their way because they want that hallway. Would it be okay to move? And he's like asking me. I was like, oh man, no problem, man. I'm at your, it's cool vibe, city, hippie shit. I realized the faster I get that shit out of the way, the more I'm gonna make Steve happy. He'll help me out. I'm not worried. So guess what they did? They put us down in the judges' lounge. Now, the judges' lounge, you're not allowed to have anything in the judges' lounge but weed. There's no commercial stuff. You're not even allowed to talk about selling stuff. So there's no tables. There's no, sponsors. There's no, displays or nothing. But there was an activist table. And in the last year that I did the cup, I brought over Chris Conrad, Mickey Norris, a whole, a team from Virginia. Had this big, huge table in the back of the judges' lounge, and Sandy Burbank and her daughter. It was just a really, really wonderful activist table. But I'll tell you one little experience, right? When I was up in the hallway that first year, I had the hallway, this really, really cool Rasta dude. He comes in, he was so bewildered. And I think this experience captures the essence of the Cannabis Cup, because he had bought his badge, which is like what, $500 or something like that to buy the badge so you can attend the Cannabis Cup. And he, of course, flew from wherever the hell he flew to probably spend another 500 and another 500 on lodge. So he's like 1,500 into this, and he's walking around, he's bewildered, comes to my table and he's asking where's the weed, man? And I was like, I'll tell you what, man, sit down here at my table. I'll roll a joint and I'll explain how this works. But yeah, what ATN said is the way it goes. And the thing about it is that there was two things that were sort of colliding. One was a lot of the weed that was winning the Cannabis Cups were long season bud and stuff like that they weren't even growing for the shops usually. They were growing the shorter season stuff that was faster to grow, was mostly what you found in the coffee shops. So the bud that was actually winning the prizes that you were getting at the coffee shops was really kind of a limited time offer. The people that are year round weren't really able to get it so consistently, number one. And then number two, the cup itself would try to get a lot of readers' eyes on their magazine. And they would do a lot of stuff right there around the Cannabis Cup to get a lot of stuff going on in the magazine. That's when they set the ad rates for the next year. So the whole thing was sort of, a clever sort of gimmick in a way, in the end. But nonetheless, really, really, really great weed. And I actually became a judge in Michigan many years later. And that's cool. You get this huge bag with all different kinds of samples. And it's actually, if you take it seriously, it's a job to try to test whatever it is they give you. They give you a lot of it, and you only have a few days to go through it. It was a challenge to really do it right. But it's fun. It's definitely fun to be a judge, and the Cannabis Cups are definitely cool. And when we get to the country level, oh man, we're talking the St. Louis Exposition, or that Paris, like that label on the Jack Daniels where it's like 1899 Paris Exposition, you imagine how cool that exposition was, that fucking contest was, now double that, and that's going to be our weed one, man.
Hell yeah. All right. Councilmember Armstrong, what was your first experience? Were you a judge when you were a judge? What was the other one, Rico?
Oh, have you been to a cup? Were you like, what was your experience? Have you been, and then were you a judge? I guess it doesn't have to be a cup. It could be a fest like you were talking about too. That's a competition. Just like any movement kind of deal. The High Times Cup is the most recognized, but there's all kinds of shit.
Yeah, it was really the first international one. Councilmember Armstrong.
So yeah, my first one was in 2017. It was the New York Harvest Fest Cup. I've also been to one in Boston, but yeah, my first experience was, first of all, it was my first experience at a cannabis festival. So by Sunday afternoon, I had seen a lot of stuff that I hadn't seen in quite some time, and seeing all the freaks and was enjoying the weekend. But when kind of what Etienne was talking about, the feeling of freedom, like I didn't really realize it until I was in the middle of that cup. Like that year it was kind of smaller, so they actually had a blue tarp that you get at Walmart, and like 8 guys rolling the joints on the blue tarp and literally just throwing them to us. So it was very small, and maybe 60 or 70 people being the judges. So in the middle of it, I felt that feeling of freedom that I kind of not felt before, even though I had been smoking freely all weekend. I felt that. So and I was asked to be a judge for edibles at that cup as well a couple of years later, and I gave it to another vet because you had the morning of it to judge the edibles, and I knew that would mean my whole Saturday evening would have been laying in bed. So I gave that to the older gentleman that I came with. He was happy to eat them all, give them his opinion, and then go take like a 14-hour nap. Because it's really hard to judge edibles, especially if you've got a bunch of entries. And some of them make them stronger than others, obviously. So yeah, that was the only time I was offered to be a judge, and I gave it away. But I think the cups are just like anything else in it. Our cups are the cups are reliant on the grassroots are better, and the more commercial it gets, we're not going to like the way those events go, as Etienne was talking about earlier. So, and that's where I'll stop on that. I think that answers it.
All right, Ricardo, and then our guest showed up. Ricardo.
So my first experience with the cup, it wasn't at a cup, and I couldn't partake, but I just got back from Iraq, and my squad decided to take a trip, and we all got in a van, dipped out to Amsterdam from Stuttgart, Germany, and stayed there over a long weekend, and went to like the Bulldog, the Grasshopper, and went all around sightseeing. And I just saw all kinds of pictures from all these people that seemed so happy. I was like, I want some of that. And so me and my squad, we signed a $1 bill, threw it up in the Bulldog. And I kind of said to myself, like, that's what I'm going to do. That's what I'm going to do. And so my first opportunity came in 2015 to go to the Cup in Denver. And Doc Sisley threw me an invite, and I joined her over there. That's where I met Kevin Richardson with the We for Warriors Project and a bunch of other peeps. We were posted up right next to a Nyambe Tosh, which was awesome. But there was weed all over the place. It was huge. I just kept asking myself, I was like, how is this legal? There's no way this is legal. Walking through this, like just all the different stalls and everybody just smoking, walking, joking, like nothing was going on. I was like, man, this is just, it was insane. Cause again, you're talking about this little Bubbleman, right? This little bubble of freedom, and everywhere else it's like hit or miss. So to be able to have that experience in the States while prohibition's still getting figured out was pretty cool. But I want to shut up now and let you introduce our guest.
Well, thank you, Marcus, for answering our questions prior. We actually just read through your interview, but we're going to start back over because it's our time, so we can do whatever the fuck we want. We were actually talking about the High Times Cannabis Cup and, you know, each one of our cup experiences and all of that. And yeah, we kind of covered those. So basically, welcome to our Veterans Action Roundtable number 26. Our guest is Bubbleman. And we have a series of questions. Now, he has answered them, and we have kind of read through his answers, but we're going to go through and see his embellishments now, since we get to double interview the man himself, the wonderful stoner, the man, the myth, the legend. Hi, Bubbleman.
Well, first of all, I apologize for being late. What an idiot I am. I don't know why, but my calendar had it as 5, and I couldn't even come in on time for that. So super apologies to you guys. I've only heard a little bit, but great vibes as always. Thanks for having me in here, Etienne. I've shit the bed completely on this whole thing. He sent me these messages and these questions, and I answered them all on the computer. He's like, bud, we don't do it that way. I'm like, oh my God, okay. Let's start by shitting the bed once, and then let's be an hour and a half late. Really great way to show respect to the veterans. My apologies, guys. I went and picked up my son from SFU University, and I've been actually hanging out with him. He's been away during the week, and I only see him on the weekend. So that's why that all went down. But yeah, no, this is great. Super stoked to be here, and yeah, I'm happy to answer some questions. Etienne, did you want me to just kind of go through the first one, or?
Yeah, basically, yeah. It's you know, how'd you come into the cannabis field? Why cannabis? Why'd you choose cannabis? How did it stick to you? You know.
You know what, for me, it was very much like the scene out of Dave Chappelle's Half Baked, when him and all his little homies like smoke herb for the first time, and then they go to the store. That's the scene where he's like, Abba Zaba, you my only friend. And he's like hugging the Abba Zaba guy. It was very much like that for me. I was young. I was 14 years old, so I wasn't really, you know, anywhere near being an adult. So I still had that sort of a little bit of my magical thinking left in me. And it was one of my hockey buddies that got me turned on to it. He had a joint. Everyone else on the hockey team was like Joe Strady. You know, at that age, nobody was doing anything. But here we have Steve McAvoy, whose father was a CFL referee. He was like, hey, like, you want to smoke a joint? And I was like, I didn't even know what a joint was, but it was sort of love at first sight. Really just loved the experience. I'm very type A. I'm very quick. I'm very like fast, and just, I need to be pulled back and slowed down. I have a very alpha strong ego. I don't need alcohol. I don't need drugs. And I'm probably like, if there's other, I was really of the belief that it was probably bad for me. And there was a point where my father, you know, rest in peace to him, he came up to me at one point, and I was maybe 16 at this point. He said, look, if you're going to do this, do it right, because you're in the Bible Belt, and there's a penitentiary 30 miles down the road full of people who thought that they could do this. and now they're in the penitentiary. And Stony Mountain Penitentiary was a particularly, it'd be like being in Indiana at Terre Haute or something. Like, it's a bad prison. It's got really, like, you know, serious dudes in there. Habitual florists definitely don't belong there. And I sort of took that to heart and got together with some of my other friends that thought the same way. And we came up with this idea that our activism should be hemp-based. We're in the prairies. We can approach the farmers. And this was not, you know, we weren't learning this by economics courses or farming, or we were learning it from smoking herb, you know, and really like what most people would call abusing herb. I don't think of it as abusing, but man, like, we smoked, and we smoked a lot. Like, for me and my buddies, if we would go play pool one night, we'd save up and buy as much weed as we could, whether it was an eighth or a quarter or whatever, and then we'd roll it all and literally smoke every joint before we even played pool. We wouldn't even save one for afterwards. This is how, you know, completely hypnotized we were by the whole cannabis vibe. But I feel very lucky that I got into cannabis, because in the city that I grew up in, Winnipeg, Manitoba, which is one of the more, you know, we always had the murder capital of Canada. So that's kind of sets the tone what Winnipeg was like. It's a little bit harsh and rough around the edges. And if you grow up in Winnipeg, you're comfortable almost anywhere you go. Like, you could just go places and be comfortable, because it's a bit harder than soft. And so, yeah, that was just kind of a little bit of the background. We got into the hemp activism, and we started approaching farmers and our government. And in a very short period of time, surprisingly, because even our supporters, I'll never forget, one of our strongest supporters said, hemp in Canada, that'll happen when hell freezes over. Unfortunately, he had no understanding of how fucking cold it gets in Winnipeg in the winter. And hell did actually freeze over. I think it was colder than Mars that day. And we got hemp growing in our province for the first time in over 73 years in a very hardcore Bible Belt. Like, this is like Fargo, North Dakota to you guys. You know, like, that's what Winnipeg is. It's like Fargo, North Dakota. And I don't know how much time you guys have spent up in Fargo, North Dakota, but it's a little bit backwoods, and those are my roots, and I love it, and that's where I'm from. And, you know, that's what really led me in. And I think that pathway that we took really came from my dad pulling me aside and saying, hey, listen, if you're going to do this, you better do it right, and you better do it smart. And so that was kind of through his advice, we got into that whole hemp thing. And, you know, Etienne is actually one of the very few people that I know that was doing this same type of activism at the same time. I mean, this goes back to 91, 92, 93. The year we got our hemp grown was 94. Those are very early years for hemp activism in North America.
No, and we are literally, it's hard to believe we are such a younger generation of that because of how long it's been going. But, you know, I did see what you were doing, and it definitely inspired us domestically. But we also saw the same repression, such as what was happening with just having a high times in Canada. I mean, it was such, I mean, you could go to jail for it. I mean, actually, you had an activist in Canada who actually fought against that just to actually get that information out there. But I want to go over to Councilmember Armstrong. He has a question.
Oh, he's on mute.
I'm sorry, my turn to screw everything up.
You're in good company.
Yeah. Oh. So what drew you into the hash world itself after starting with hemp activism? What drew you into hash in particular?
Well, okay, you know, I really should start as well that one of the things that was unique for me, and I didn't know this back in the time. I mean, I was that guy growing up that everyone was like, oh yeah, Richardson has great weed. Like, he's always got great weed. And I didn't really understand what that meant because I wasn't growing it. I was just locating it and finding it. And I realized I was like a truffle pig or a truffle dog. I had the senses that some of my friends, a lot of them, did not have, like a lot of them. I had just a hyper awareness and a hypersensitivity to certain compounds in cannabis that I would be like, oh my God, do you smell the complexity of that? Most of my friends were like, oh, I don't know, it smells like pepper. That smells like gas. Or, and I'd be more like a wine person, like, oh, but can't you smell those other tones that are kind of in behind that? And then there's these other ones that are completely underneath. And so that I didn't understand what that was, but I did use that to my advantage to always find exceptional cannabis. And so as I'm finding exceptional cannabis and loving the flavor and the taste, I'm building a tolerance to the cannabinoids that are present on said cannabis. So I'm also at the point I'm dealing successfully because I'm like accessing great cannabis. I'm just like, my mentor, Ron Hickey, who's completely off his fucking rocker. God bless him. He's absolutely insane person, the best person ever. You should have him on here one day. You guys will get a kick out of him. One of my early first mentors, when I went down to his cannabis grow store in Winnipeg, and I said, oh, I'm trying to grow some tomatoes. And he said, listen, kid, I know you're not growing tomatoes. You're not growing tomatoes. Why don't we just talk about what we're growing? We're growing weed, aren't we? And so this was my intro to Ron Hickey. This is a man who served 11 and a half years in Stony Mountain, the federal penitentiary I spoke about earlier, for cannabis, for growing cannabis. The man spent 12 Christmases away from his family. Way too long. So dealing and making free pot and smoking enormous amounts of pot, what happened was eventually I hit a ceiling. I just hit a ceiling, and there was no getting past that ceiling. I could smoke. Once I moved to BC in '96, and I was, selling 600-700 pounds a week, I had a lot of free weed. In fact, so much free weed that I was donating it to the BC Compassion Club, like 3, 4, 5 pounds at a time. I'm like, hey, Hillary, it's Christmas time. Like, give all the members an 8, like here's 9 pounds of weed. And often it was just even from, if I bought 400 or 500 pounds from a certain guy, I know that every pound is going to be 470 grams. Well, a sellable a pound in Canada is 448 grams. So you can be generous and put 454 in there, but it's 448 pounds is what people were weighing for. So, there's 22 grams in every bag, and you just bought 400 pounds. Do the math. You end up with an enormous amount of free weed. So I just had weed coming up my ears. I was just smoking. I bet you at one point I was smoking 2+ ounces a day easily, and my wife was just kind of like. She'd like be bringing me food, just coughing. And I was like, fuck, she's not even exaggerating. This is insane. We live in a fucking cloud of smoke. And that really is what started driving me towards first the oils, but the oils were just like, I don't know, all the guys that were making it all had the same look. They all had the kind of same dirt under the fingernails, and just kind of like they came out of their garage like a troll or something. And don't get me wrong, I'm not judging these guys, amazing guys. I just started looking at it and being like, like I remember him failing chemistry in grade 11, but now he's doing chemistry in his garage, and I'm going to inhale that chemistry into my lungs. So I was like, it took me a very quick period of time before I was like, you know what, that's not my game right there. And I got into dry sifting a little bit. I met Rob Clark in 1995, and he smoked a bowl of dry sift with me at this Thai food restaurant behind the
Come on, Starlink. Screenshot this, Rico.
Rob comes up to me with a bong, and he smokes it with me, him and John Conroy, on the stairs to this restaurant. And he says, if it don't bubble, it ain't worth the trouble. And that was the first time I ever saw resin melt into a liquid. And so that really set me off. And not only did it melt into a liquid, it blew me so far outside my ceiling that I had created for myself that it was just, I'd never experienced anything like it. So that was really, of course, Rob and Dave, because it was Skunkman Sam's hash that Rob just happened to have. I didn't know that at the time, but I would meet Dave like a year or so later. A couple of years later, 3 years later. And then we would all become good friends, and they would become mentors to me. But that's really what drove me to hash, my ability to taste and to experience, the tolerance that I built, and wanting to just smash through it. Also, I love getting uncomfortably high. I'm not gonna lie. Like when other people are kind of just like on the brink and they're just like, this is too much, I'm like, okay, let's do this. I bet you we could get higher. So
Where can we push that edge, right?
Yeah, we called it on the brink. As long as I was teetering over the edge of it, looking into the abyss, I felt pretty good.
You were comfortable there. That was your comfort zone.
Yeah, exactly. Comfortably on the brink.
Councilmember Prieta, you have a question for the Bubbleman.
Yeah, Mr. Bubbleman, can you give us some insight into their cannabis realm from your POV in Canada, your point of view there, all the things you've been through, where it's going now?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a complex one. We're obviously, first and foremost, when you get federal law, no matter how bad it is, you have to appreciate it, because it's never as bad as having a gun shoved in your face, having your children taken by family health services, being thrown in a cage like Ron was in Stony Mountain Penitentiary with people who murdered children and raped women and did all these terrible things. This is insane, for someone who just smoked cannabis. So first and foremost, before I start the big rant of complaining, I want to say I'm appreciative of the fight that was done and where we got so far. Federal legalization is a pretty big deal. Mail ordering all your regulated herb, and it's tested. Sometimes people are like, oh, I don't want you keep your regulated weed. It's like, well, no, like what you don't understand is everything you consume in the world is regulated, unless you're like buying it off the street in Bangkok. Like it's all regulated. Even the chocolate bars that you buy, they regulate that shit, like shit goes over metal detectors and stuff. So they know there's no metal in your food. Like there's a lot of things that people don't understand that happens with all of the products that they buy. And because they've had this sort of intimate relationship with cannabis secretly in a closet or whatever, we get really connected to it. And I get that. But, one of my disappointments, okay, we had a great medical program. Everyone used medical to, it was the shield, unfortunately. A lot of people used medical as a shield to get a license to protect them from having their home taken, from having all of these different things. And if it was just to grow cannabis, it didn't bug me. When it was to grow cannabis and to sell, I was kind of like, you're kind of putting the people who are just growing cannabis for medicine, you're kind of putting their license at risk by pretending that that's who you are, but you're actually growing cannabis. And don't get me wrong, I'm not against selling cannabis. I'm against selling cannabis if it puts the fucking license at risk for patients who aren't selling cannabis. They just want access to grow their own weed. So that was like a sensitive. I was always getting myself in trouble because, of course, I called everyone out that did it, and everyone did it. I swear I was the only person who had a medical license that wasn't growing weed, drying it up and selling it out the back door. Like I said, I'm not against that, but that's not what these licenses were for. That's not what we fought for. So anyway, it got worse and worse for the patients. And then recreational came in. Well, recreational came in and said things like, okay, we have provincial stores. So it's a double-edged sword. It's good and it's bad. If you have great products and the provinces want to buy your products, one province buys your products, 600 stores can get your product without having to deal with 600 stores. Just like liquor works here in Canada. The LC buys it, they bring it in, they distribute it to stores, and those stores sell it. That can work out in your favor, or it can work out against you, because if they decide they don't like your products, well, now you're SOL. You're not going to be able to sell them in that province anymore. And there's a variety of ways. Like our processing company has a processing license. We have a sales amendment license. We have an R&D license, and we have a medical license. So we could set up a medical platform and sell direct to patients, but that's its own can of worms as well. You have to understand that, and this is the real bummer of this, and maybe you guys will feel is that, recreational cannabis users are easy customers to deal with, and medical patients are much more difficult. I mean, that's a serious fucking thing. You know what I mean? Like, this is like your life that you're dealing with this. Some people are trying to reduce, people are mitigating PTSD and bad memories, so many different things that it's so important for. And this is one of the things that really drives me nuts about it, In the recreational market, the province is going to say to you, look, you better make enough of this product so that if we sell out the 10 kilos that we order, that we can order another 10 kilos and fulfill the order. If you don't do that, we're going to strike you and put you at the bottom of the order list. So they punish the rec market like that, and it makes the rec people go and make these huge lots of products, hoping that when they get it to the market that it'll sell. The problem with that is that if a recreational people don't need products consistently as badly as medical patients do. That's a focus that we should have for medical patients first and foremost, and not rec patients, which aren't patients, just recreational users. When recreational users, when the OCS says to me, Ontario Cannabis Store says, we're going to need another 10 kilos right after we order this 10 kilos, that's an enormous amount of energy for me to make that available for a rec user. Now, in medical, we sell to Shelter, we sell to CanMart, a couple of small companies that have medical platforms before we've set up our own. And what we find there is they're willing to take small lots. They're willing to take whatever good product they can access. And the problem with that is you end up buying these small lots for medical, and a patient finds that and says, oh my God, this is amazing, I love it. And now it's not available for 7 more months because that was a small craft grower. They did one batch of it. They're growing something different this time, but they'll do it again next time. And we have that situation in Canada where there's this excessive amount available for rec users, and there's these limited lots available for patients. And of course, the price, if you're thinking, well, if I was a medical patient, I would just go and buy the recreational. Well, the recreational stuff is insanely expensive. And it has like insane excise taxes from the CRA, which are like 25 to 32% or something of the cost is excise tax going right to the government. So there's problems, but you know, I guess there's problems we can deal with, and at least we have access in the meantime to both, that there is recreational and medical available. There's all sorts of stupid rules in place, and we'll have to figure it out and better it as we go along. But that's kind of like the short story. It's good and it's bad.
Right on. Councilmember Crowitz, you have the next question.
Thank you. Thank you. It's such an honor. It's really great to have you on our roundtable here, man. You know, just following up on what you were just saying real quick before I ask the next question. You know, we're really concerned in the United States about that. Actually, in Canada, at least you had medical, and then you established the adult regulated access. It seems like, you know, following the state laws around the country here in the US, in states that didn't do that, that didn't have well-regulated medical before they went to adult rec, really hurts patients. So having the federal government in the position we are in the United States, where it's by law, and it actually says in the law that it's not medical, which is a ridiculous situation, but that's where we're at. And then to go from that straight to adult rec, we're really worried as vets, you know, that medical cannabis is sort of in the crosshairs in a harsh way here in the US. But man, you know, you up there already having the federal system legal. I mean, what is it like to use your mail system legally? I mean, that's some like straight up Mr. Rogers neighborhood shit, you know, Mr. Canada, to be able to just actually, yeah, wow.
It's pretty trippy, I won't lie. I mean, I'll be honest, I'm Bubbleman. So people have been sending me hash for like 20 solid years from all over the world. Like I've been getting shit in my PO box. I try to tell people not to. I'm like, no, don't do that. Don't do that. And they just send it anyway. I've been getting it since 1999. Hash has been showing up in my PO box from Australia and New Zealand and everywhere you can possibly imagine. It's completely bonkers, but God bless all those people because it was wonderful and enjoyed. So less unique for me, I think, because it's been happening for so long. And I was always of the mindset, how the fuck can I control what people send me? I was never worried about getting in trouble because there was no emails of me going, yeah, man, send me an ounce of your best, like with transactions. And it was always me going, no, like, don't do that. I'm telling you, don't fucking send that. This was when it was like super illegal. Anyway, now that it is legal, it's pretty unique to be able to go on the V.A.C. Cannabis Store and buy some CBD cream and just put my mom's address in there and ship it off to Manitoba. That is, it's surreal and unbelievable, really. It's a good thing. The mail came out with smell-proof packaging on their own because the whole system just reeked. That's how many people were ordering weed once that happened. It was a big deal. Every post office was like, listen, every truck reeks, every fucking warehouse reeks. This is out of control. Don't these people know how to seal this shit? So they came out with their own.
Can you show, do you have any pack? Could you just show us what that looks like?
It's a Canada Post mail package. I don't have one here, but it's just like one of those bubble wrap packages, but I guess it's got a special inside that they had to buy with a membrane of, I guess it's like PTFE or something that terpenes can't breach. So they came out with it like quick. Like it was not like a 17-year thing. It was just like, it was like 3 months or something. And these guys, like, they were in the boardroom. They were like, listen, we're going to have to figure this out. People are going to get robbed. Like shit's going to go down. Every driver knew what every package was. It was bad.
Yeah, I guess, a lot of off-gassing would be the issue. Council,
especially in the summer.
Oh, I bet, especially. Councilmember Kendra, you have a question.
Yes, hi. So from your perspective, what are some of the pros and cons of a legal market?
The pros and cons of a legal market. Well, I mean, you know, the pros are that we can play now, that we can all kind of become involved and sort of drive this thing. And I think it's what we were all fighting for years. I was kind of, you know, one of my mentors, Skunkman Sam, would always say to me, he's like, yeah, you know, the difference between me and a lot of these activists, they were fighting for some specific people to earn the profits, and I was just fighting for cannabis's freedom. I don't care who earns the profits. That's an old school baller thing to say, because he taught me well. I'm the same way. Would it be great if I could make some profits and you guys could? Sure, it would be great. But if we can't, you know, the fact that we get to play, and it feels fairly fair here in Canada, even though I see my own old activist friends absolutely divided, split down the middle. They're like, we'll never support that system. Like that system is this and that and this and that. It's like, you know what? I think that I respect that as well. But for me, with a family, like, you know, I used to sell a lot of cannabis and I could have been thrown into a prison with murderers and rapists. And instead, I got to become legal. And now it's like people at my kid's school come up to me and say, hey, like, can I invest in your company? Whereas what they used to say was, oh, the drug dealer lives up on Ocean View. So I think I'm really kind of appreciative of that normalization of cannabis that comes with what, you know, a free market. Now, the cons of a free market are the people who design them not to be free. And so by definition, a free market is not a free market. You have to like weasel your way in and bore your way in. It's designed specifically for certain people with privilege, and everyone else that's brown has to rot in jail. So until all those people are out of jail, we will never be able to call this a free market.
Very well stated, sir. Councilmember Armstrong, you have the next question.
Okay, so yeah, Bubbleman, I'd like to start by saying, you know, I learned so much watching Hash Church, and one of the things that really that I saw the quality, obviously, of all the hash and everything that was going on, and the growers, the quality medicine, that really did set me on a search for quality medicine. What are some of the products that excite you, and what are some that you are kind of weary of in you know, some of these up and coming products?
Like, what are some of the problems? You cut out a little bit there. What are some of the problems of?
No, what are some of the products that excite you? The newer products that excite you, and what are some of them that, are there any that you are wary of?
Yes, I'm definitely wary of any type of flavored terpenes. So that scares me a little bit with certain types of oils and things that they're putting into vape pens. Now, this is a recreational product. you know, if we're talking recreational, I would say that from a medical standpoint, there hasn't been enough sort of, and I guess it also is a balance, right? Like, it's like, what is it doing to you? If it's damaging your lungs, that to me scares me, because cannabis is never supposed to damage our lungs. We've done something very bad and very poor decisions if we've come to the conclusion that we're now damaging our lungs with cannabis after, you know, thousands of years of it not damaging people's lungs. Products that excite me are products that my team has been working on. Like, you know, we're a hash company, and hash is like 1% of the 3% of the concentrate market here in Canada. So we're fighting over 1% of the market. So step one was to create that to be more like 8 or 9% of the market, so we can get it to be a little bit bigger. And so how we're doing that is we have a product called the Hazel Stick, and this is a pure hash stick. It's got no paper, it has no glue, and it has no cannabis. It's just hash rolled flat into a paper and then rolled up into like a tube. And it's 1 gram, and they're totally novel. Look at you smiling right now, man. Like, I got you all giggly just thinking about it. It really is. In California, they have been sold in the past under the name Pixie Stick. We call them Hazel Hash Sticks. We sell tens of thousands of these things a month. It actually blew up at, you know, in the first 2 months of selling them, we took over like 14, 15% of the hash market in Ontario, which is that 1%, but they do like, you know, $900 million annually or whatever. So it ends up being still a substantial number. So that is a product that excites me, because I want to bring people towards the experience of the unadulterated cannabinoid high. Why do we like getting high? Well, because of what's in the resin glands. And so we can smoke those resin glands diluted on plant matter and get one effect, or we can concentrate them and smoke them through oils or hashes or whatever and get different effects. And so I like bringing people closer to that. People that are smoking pre-rolls are never going to be like, oh yeah, I'll go spend $1,000 on a rig and a bowl and a carb cap and a dabber. Oh, you got to get the temp tech, you know, that's $120. And then I'm going to need a torch, another $120. And we better start buying $100 grams, because what else am I going to put into this thing? And so all of a sudden it's just like, you know what, you're a lifer if that's what you're doing. Like, that's what Etienne and I are doing. We're lifers in this, but people that are smoking joints aren't. So the Hazel is a great way to get a joint smoker into a hash product without buying anything else, because the hash itself is the smoking vessel. And they've already got a lighter, they've already got lips, so that's all they need to smoke the Hazel. So we're very excited about that. I personally am the most excited about that one. And then we have another product, and I don't know if I can actually, oh, here. We have another product, and these are really cool.
Just out of curiosity, what is a retail on a Pixie Stick in Canada currently?
Like, you can buy it retail for about 29 Canadian dollars, which is probably about 22 US. It's a gram of hash.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, and keep in mind, we get like a very small percentage of that. But it's a numbers game, right? You want to sell 100,000 of them a month, and then you're like, woohoo, we're doing pretty good. So the next product is Arthi, who raised almost and he said, you know, these Hazels are amazing. Me and my buddy went and bought one each because it's COVID, so we don't want to share. And we, you know, the problem is like I took one hit of that thing, and you know, I was good to go. Like I didn't need any more. I had 90% left of it. He's like, you need to figure out a way to get those things broken up into servings and put into some type of pipe or something. And so I found this company called Caldwell's. And what Caldwell's does is they create these paper. These are paper. I wish my camera, oh, there we go. It's just about, come on, give us the love. So this is a paper one hitter. It's a very thick paper, right? And on the inside, it has a thimble that's made out of 304 stainless steel. And it fits 0.2 of a gram. So I sell 5 of these in a package. It's now the convenience. We use the Hazels that don't go to market. We powder them up, fill them up into here, put a little sticker over it, put 5 of them into a package, and for the same price, around 25 to 29 bucks Canadian, get a gram of hash. Now it's set up in 5 servings. So say if the 5 of you wanted to all get together and go spend, get 1 pack of these, you'd each have 1. And it hits, honestly, about 10 big smoky hits. So I did a bunch of R&D on this. This is the first thing I've smoked in probably 20 years. I really only vaporize. And so I hadn't combusted in a long time, but I found these so damn convenient that it was like how Coca-Cola would sell cannabis or hash. It's like you're selling a serving. You're making it so damn convenient. And the thing is, like, when you throw it away, you don't feel bad. You're like, okay, well, that's reasonable. Tiny bit of stainless steel. It's not like a big electronic thing or a big bunch of plastic. And it's all kind of biodegradable and goes back and recyclable. And so we're pretty excited about these. They haven't gotten to market yet. We're just in the middle of doing all of our R&D. We've sent off our NNCPs. In Canada, you're forced to send off a new product code. For every product you want to sell, it has to have a full packaging and all labels, THC stickers that have to be certain lengths, certain colors that aren't allowed, colors that you can use. 60 days it takes them to give us back the ability to now send that information out to each province. They'll put their orders in. During those 60 days, we'll make as many as we can. And we'll see how the market likes the Caldwell one hitter. I think it's pretty cool.
It's unique, and that's the thing, is people need to look for more unique product lines, in the sense of, joints were popular before COVID. However, now there needs to be more single serving situations we're finding that here in California. So great job on you and your team doing that. Councilmember Prieta, who also played Bubbleman earlier in our show.
I did. Yeah, I did. I hope you're not mad at me.
I thank you for stepping in, dude. Are you kidding me? I was
It went well.
You stepped right in.
I personally think that it went well, but I don't have the same pizzazz as you do. But those little pre-filled hash cigarettes that are environmentally friendly are a great idea. We're looking to gain access through the Veterans Affairs. So they have this IND program here that gives out 300 grams a month to the people who are in it. And we're looking to expand that program through the VA so that we could start to get access to this stuff and not break the bank, get a consistent supply, find something that works for us and be able to get it when we need it, like you were talking about earlier. Something like that, I think, is worthy of bringing up to the Veterans Affairs Department, right? Especially, you said you get like 10 good pulls from that. Somebody who has been smoking flower for a while might be able to pull on it and get what they used to get from like a joint, 2 joints maybe in one hit, and it'll last longer. So that could help with the tolerance level. I'm sorry, I'm kind of just open, kind of taking up the time for this question that I'm supposed to be asking you, but it got some wheels turning. I want to make sure that it was stated. Maybe after this question that I ask you, if you could touch on the Canadian VA system for the veterans up there. I know they have partnerships with different growers or companies or something to provide for, or at least they did, the veterans, or there's some kind of voucher program. They also use the mail system. But what do you think the ceiling is for the most expensive joints? Talking about joints and stuff like that with hash or just regular joints. Do you think there is a ceiling for the most expensive joint?
Not in California, I don't. But up here in Canada, we're a little bit more pragmatic. We're, we're the neighbors up to the north here. We're pretty chill, not too many. We're still young and immature in the sense as this big group of people comes into cannabis for the first time, a lot of them, it's not the same cannabis community that it used to be. It's kind of this more open arms cannabis community. A lot of people coming in, and I mean, honestly, they'll be much more attuned to pay $6 for 0.2 of a gram of hash than they will to pay like $100 for really even a beautiful gram of hash, let alone a joint.
Go Starlink. Oh, there he
Where
is.
did I freeze?
Yeah, you just started. So
Most expensive joint. I was just saying that Canada's a little kind of bit cheaper in the sense like they're looking to spend like $6 on one of these, not $100 joints. I think that it'll be a while before our community, our cannabis community, matures enough to create enough people that have an interest. Right now, basically, the people who can make multi-$100 joints are, you know, we have like 100,000 or more people in the country that have medical licenses to grow. Like I have a medical license to grow 100 plants, you know, like my friends have medical licenses to grow 200-300 plants. So there's an enormous amount of licenses out there. And those are really the people that make products like that. But I don't know when they'll become available in the actual legal market. It'll be interesting to see.
no, I agree. It's something that here in California, I mean, people have tried to go high end and things, and joints are a very tricky thing, you know, because as stated, you know, as soon as you start to break a joint down, as opposed to like a hash joint, which is different from a flower joint, as soon as you break down the flower, it starts to degrade, and depending on how it's stored and the terpenes get sucked into the paper, you can end up with spending way too much money on, as we called it earlier, a pretendica. You know what I'm saying? It just doesn't get you there. If you had the fresh flower and broke it open, that's a different scenario. Then unfortunately, how long it takes, depending on when it was manufactured, you know, what is the manufacturing span in Canada? In California, it's a year and the product has to be taken off the market. So, I mean, depending on how it's stored and as well as how it's packaged will have a great effect, especially if it's a pre-roll on what you would get versus what the experience you would get if you had actually harvested and dried that properly.
It falls into the label. So if you've got the label saying it's this percentage of terpenes and this percentage of cannabinoids, when that label changes more than 10 or 15%, you get an RTV, you get a return to vendor. So yeah, I mean, in a perfect world, pre-rolled joints would be like, you know, the companies that wanted to make the money off of them would just supply the equipment to the stores and just put it into the back room and it'd be like, we make our pre-roll joints daily, like the donuts, because tomorrow they're no good. You know,
Yeah,
putting
it's
a
sort of like the
pre-roll
fresh
joint on the
coffee.
market.
Yeah,
Yeah, of course.
yeah, they have coffee grinders in almost any grocery store. So I mean, that makes sense because people want fresh coffee, not, you know, prepackaged, dried out, flavorless, oilless, you know, stuff that we used to all get in every branch of the military. Okay, our final question was basically surrounding the other day you were on Hash Church, you were talking about legends. And so, you know, if you could lift the veil a little bit for our audience about legends, what it isn't about. I'm aware of it and I've heard of it, whereas many people are unaware of what it is specifically. So educate them, one, what it is, and then what's taking place.
All right, just put these on my shoulder like my boxing belts. Right there, baby, right there. So Legends of Hash was me and Skunkman Sam sitting around in his apartment in Amsterdam. And I don't exactly remember the first year we did it. Maybe it was like 2003. Maybe it was 2002. I don't really remember exactly, but we were sitting in his place and I was like, he was like, what was your first cup? And I said, 1995. He's like, oh, pretty good, pretty good. Mine was 89 and I won it. And I'm like, well, wasn't that like the first cup ever? He's like, yeah, I've been to every cup. And I'm like, damn, that's crazy that you used to just go to the old cups. And I didn't even realize at the time that I was basically in the same group, because 95 is basically, you know, those are early days, PAX Party House. Like that was the pinnacle of the Cannabis Cup. It changed a multitude of times, but anyone that went to the PAX Party House knows that that shit was baller. First of all, the place was right next door to a police department, and there was always Dutch cops and cars and motorcycles parked out front, with a whole like Grateful Dead scene going off right next door with just fucking freaks and trippers and smoking big joints, and it was absolutely a gong show. And we loved it, but of course it was High Times, so we loved to complain about it too. And oh, High Times, they did this wrong and they did that wrong, and they shit the bed over here and they shit the bed over there. And Jesus H. So at one point, I just said to Sam, I said, look, dude, High Times is bringing these amazing people to Amsterdam. There's a couple of thousand of us here. You know, we love it every year. It's like family. I come and see you and Diana and Rob and Michael and all these great people, and it's amazing. And he was like, yeah, you know, I just wish we could, you know, we've always did try to have a little dinner here, a little thing here, but we somehow got to talking like, what if we created the metaphorical set of bubble bags for all the people at the Cannabis Cup, and we dropped them all through the bags, and we just pulled the 90 micron and the 73 micron, and those 50 people we had a party with. And that's really was the beginning of Legends. They had a good friend named Simone who owned the Lebanese restaurant called The Artiste. And I had been at that restaurant in the past, you know, smoking bong rips with Dave and Rob, blowing, you know, hash smoke into this tiny little restaurant with a super like low hanging roof. And people were complaining about it. They were like, Dutch people were like, oh, blah, 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 blah. And Simone was just like, you can leave if you don't like it. If you can smoke cigarettes, they can smoke bong rips. It was amazing. I've never seen anything like it. So of course, that's where we threw Legends of Hash. We would support, yeah, I've even got my Legends of Hash hat on right now in Barcelona. Very cool. We would support Simone. We would sell the tickets. I would sell the tickets. It was a matter of how could you get to Legends? Was Legends an ego thing? Was it like, well, let's invite DNA and Soma and everyone that has a big name in the cannabis culture? Or how about we humble out a little bit and everyone is equal? And if you have a beautiful piece of hash, I'll sell you a ticket. Okay, where did I freeze?
If you had a nice piece of hash,
Golden
you could
ticket.
sell them a ticket.
Perfect. So I wasn't frozen for long. I watch you guys. So it's good that you're moving, because the minute you stop moving, I'm like, oh, I froze again. Apologies for my internet. It's Elon Musk's new Starlink. It is in beta. It's still a great unit, but it does glitch out every once in a while. So yeah, that's basically how Legends started. We made it so you couldn't bring a camera because some of the largest drug smugglers in Europe were showing up there the first few years. They were very much not wanting to be filmed. So we kept it a no phone zone. You couldn't pull your phone out. You couldn't take photos. You couldn't post on social media. And that created a very unique vibe for the event. We also would bring 100-year-old Hubbly Bubbly from Afghanistan, and we would fill it up with, you know, Skunk Man Sam's 60 to 70% pure THC heads. Boom, like grams of them going into this thing at a time. It was the highest anyone had ever gotten. And even Sam himself had to step out a couple of times because the restaurant was just, you couldn't even see, your eyes were like blood red. You know, there's 40 different kinds of hash that's on the table that people have brought, and everyone's just puffing the highest quality resin. And they're all hashish aficionados, and you could just feel the love in the room. It was not about competing. It was not about self-promotion. It was just about a group of people who loved hashish, and they would spend one night enjoying that with each other.
Well, thank you very much for that clarification. And that kind of concludes our discussion. Yeah, I got to give a shout out to Frenchie Cannoli, rest in peace. One of the Hashishans. I know he will be honored at the upcoming one that's happening in October. And we talked about that earlier in the pre-interview interview that we did before he got here. So we've covered that pretty good. So Rico, George, Michael, Kendra, do y'all have any other questions for Marcus before we let the man go?
No, I just want to say again, thank you for joining us. It was fun. I enjoyed your responses and stuff. I look forward to the next Hash Church.
I'm going to share with you guys the new Legends card that no one's seen yet. So you guys will see this before anyone else.
Nice.
There it is.
Very classy. Looks great.
Yeah, they did a great job. Hey, thank you so much for having me, everybody. And I really do apologize once again. I wish I would have gotten to spend more time with all of you. Seem like people, and I hope to visit again one day.
Well, we look forward to having you again. And of course, which we'll be happy to, because we got through these questions. I know probably some more has come up, but I also look forward to our time together on Hash Church. And I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for the many years of being on there. It's been a joy to learn and to teach, and it's been an honor. So I just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart. It's been an absolutely wonderful experience, and I look forward to the next time. The last time we saw each other was 2017 in Barcelona, and I definitely look forward to the next time. So with that in mind, do you have anything else before we bow out, Bubbleman?
No, other than I guess, yeah, I would tell everyone that the live Fungi Global Summit is happening right now at fungiglobalsummit.com. It's all free from today for 2 days straight. It's going on, and there's just an enormous amount of free, amazing, from food demos and education seminars, sacred medicine, legalization of psilocybin, the transformational power of mushrooms, and on and on and on and on it goes. Invite the fungi into your life. It's like cannabis. It'll be an ally, lion's mane, chaga, turkey tail, all of these different mushrooms, including, of course, psilocybin and all the fun psychedelic ones as well. That's what I'll leave you with, because, yeah, mushrooms are good.
George, you had something real quick?
Yeah, I just wanted to thank Bubbleman for Hash Church. Like I said earlier, I think it's the education that comes from that show was just incredible. And then the other, I was going to ask you to indulge a little bit on the psilocybin, because I know that's the next little venture that you're heading on, and definitely look forward to that, seeing that. And PH Herbaholic here, by the way. So I've been definitely a long time churcher. So appreciate all the education.
Dude, that's awesome. Thanks for the kind words. I appreciate that, and I appreciate you.
All righty, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for our V.A.C. Roundtable number 26 with Marcus Bubbleman Richardson. Y'all have a great rest of your week. We'll be back in 2 weeks with Wade Laughter, U.S. Navy veteran. So yeah, another Hash Churcher is going to be joining us, and we look forward to that and to him. So with that, much love, great respect, and we're out.